Well, you know what time it is. This book was bad. Hello everyone, Britton here, also known as Some Okie Dude, and today I'm going to be covering a new book, and that is, China Mieville's Embassytown. Yeah, is science fiction novel. Railsea was the last novel he wrote before he's gone on his hiatus for the past couple years. But Embassytown, though, is his take on science fiction. On the one hand, Embassytown is a thematically rich story about language, how we relate to it, and how language relates to culture, how it impacts culture, if you will. And on the other hand, though, we get a really dull, lifeless story that really didn't go anywhere, and I didn't really care about it. I wanted to like this book, okay? If you all know, I love some of China Mieville's books. Perdido Street Station was my favorite book of last year, if you remember correctly. And I harassed people to go read that book. And I still do, by the way. Just because this book was not up to par does not mean I don't like his work anymore. I do think he has some great works that are still worthy of reading. And I had heard that Embassytown was his take on science fiction. And you all know me. I'm a huge sci-fi dork, so I'm like, I gotta read this. I have to read this. I can't help myself. So, I decided to read China Mieville's Embassytown. Because, which is funny, when I read Perdido Street Station last year, I decided to kind of do like a coin flip between this and Perdido Street Station. And, well, you know how that went. I know Mieville is a magnificent writer when he puts himself in, when he really, really wants to be. He is a fantastic writer. He can create these vivid settings, these really awesome characters, and these strange creatures in his books. But I have also seen that when he duds especially hard. I mean, if you guys remember, I was not as fond of his third Bas-Lag novel, Iron Council, and I know that is hardly controversial to say. I know a lot of people were turned off by that work. Though, funnily enough, Mieville actually likes that one the most out of his Bas-Lag books, which, cool. Anyway, alongside Iron Council, though, I found myself feeling cold when it came to Embassytown. I mean, there were some well-written moments for sure, some great evocative imagery as one would expect from a Mieville novel. But sadly, I didn't quite get the verve of Perdido Street Station. I didn't get the emotional resonance of something like The Scar. I didn't even get the city in the cities surreal, noir, political tension that was in that book. And that was actually my first Mieville book. And a pretty good one to start with if you're interested. But what I find this story really falls short is a constant gripe that I have with science fiction, and that is that the ideas get in the way of character and story. You see this even with great science fiction writers like Isaac Asimov or even Arthur C. Clarke at points. I am probably going to get assassinated for saying that. I've made my peace with this a long time ago. But I have compared Mieville's style to Lovecraft, and if you read Perdido Street Station, it's pretty much if Lovecraft wrote a steampunk fantasy, science fantasy horror, and actually wrote it pretty well. But I don't want to get on the haterade for Lovecraft. But I find that at his best, Mieville manages to exceed Lovecraft's flaws, such as his very verbose prose, his wandering tone that he has with his book, that he has with his stories, not his books, because he didn't write novels. But sadly, when I read this book, I found all of the pitfalls that I find in a Lovecraft story. Wandering story, characters that are dull as fucking white toast. Just sucks. And interesting ideas floating around in a really dull and boring story, and it hurts me to say, because, like I've said, I do like Mieville's work. I have reviewed him positively on this channel before, and I will hopefully do some more positive reviews of his books. But the last two that I've read have been duds, and it sucks. I want to read more good books from Mieville, and it sucks. And I also have characters who I don't care about in this book. And that's probably where that's probably where the story really falls flat for me. I didn't care about what was going on. The characters in this aren't particularly memorable. They don't have the life that characters like Yagharik or Bellis or Isaac or Lynn have in the Bas-Lag books. And I know he could create great characters. Tanner Sack even. Again, I'm going off the Bas-Lag books because in my opinion those are his best work. So far anyway. Right. But I didn't care about these characters, which is something I find a lot in science fiction, and something that frustrates me a lot about science fiction, is that the writers are often more invested in the ideas rather than the characters, which often sucks. I like speculative fiction, great speculative fiction in general, to me, should explore the human condition. I mean, it can explore these cool ideas on where science could go, but give it a human element, to borrow from my friend Jason. I think he's rubbing off on me. I'm sure he'll love that. But like I said, I didn't care about these characters. They didn't feel real. They didn't feel like they had gravitas to them. It didn't feel like they had their own struggles that they were dealing with. And again, I don't want to reference Bas-Lag too much, though I'm probably going to do so as this book goes along. Anyway, but not everything in this book is bad. I mean, Mieville's imagination is still very fertile. I really enjoy the atmosphere that he had in this novel. It feels like you're in a dream most of the time, which is a compliment I could give to a lot of his works. It almost feels like you're in this halfway state between dreaming and being awake. It's almost like you're in a lucid dream at some points. But I was also intrigued by the alien creatures and how they created their language and how all that stuff worked. But again, I didn't really care for them on an emotional level. Though in this case, considering the kind of Lovecraftian elements in this story, I don't think I was really supposed to. You know, I'm glad that I must count my lucky stars, and I'm glad that I decided to read Perdido Street Station last year instead of this book when I put it up for vote, because, man, if I had read this first, and I don't recommend you do that, by the way, if I read this first, I don't know if I would have waited a long time before I read any more of his work, because, like, this one was just... It was a tough read, and it's not a very long book. It is 345 pages, my copy, but it was just a long slog, and I just did not have fun with this novel, and I'm sorry, Mr. Mieville, and I've enjoyed your books in the past, so I'm not just, being an asshole. It's not one I would recommend if you want to try Mieville's work. I would definitely do, like, The City in the City, or if you really want to try yourself, Perdido Street Station, I'd go there first, or even The Scar if you want to read those. And like I said, I've mentioned those novels a lot. Am I done with Mieville's Au revoir? Or I probably said that wrong. Will I be done with Mieville after this? Hardly. I do think he's a great writer. I do think that when he puts his mind to the task, he is an excellent writer, as the books I have mentioned before have already showcased. But yeah, this book just didn't cut it for me. And there's definitely better science fiction novels that I have read in the past, such as Jeff Vandermeer's Born, or even his Southern Reach trilogy, which I think are probably my favorite science fiction things of the past, since I've been alive, I'll put it that way. At least in my modern era, I would say Jeff Vandermeer is the best. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But it sucks. I really wanted to like this book, and to be fair, I was sort of in a slog when I was reading this, so I might go back to this at some point and see if my mind changes. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. That's just the way it is. But yeah, so 2 duds from Mieville. That sucks. I really wanted to enjoy. I really wanted to like Embassytown, and as I've noted, I want to like all the books that I read. Now, is it always going to happen? No, but you know, it's just it just didn't cut it for me, and it's not the type of science fiction I was interested in. And it sounded intriguing, but the idea of these weird aliens and their language, I thought that was really cool, and it just, how do you make that idea boring? How do you do that? But then again, like I said, it's sort of an ideas over story / character science fiction, which is a pet peeve of mine if you know my taste in science fiction. So, sorry, Mieville. You could really do some great stuff, you know? You really can, Mieville. I mean, you could even say Pretty as a Street Station has science fiction elements. I prefer to call it science fantasy, because Bas-Lag is nothing like our world. Well, yeah. But Embassytown wasn't good, and it just didn't cut it, and I'm sad. I really wanted to like this book. I thought this book had some promise to it, and it just didn't. And yeah, it's really all I got. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Despite my disappointment, I enjoyed doing these reviews. You can check me out on Twitter. You can check me out on Letterboxd and Goodreads, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. And you can check me out on Discord. So, do all of those. Yeah, sorry, Mieville. Embassytown wasn't my thing. See you guys later. Bye-bye.